Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
Hello, everybody. This is Sandy. I am the founder and Chief Love Officer at LastFirstDate.com. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Last First Date Radio is an acclaimed show about achieving healthy, off-the-charts love in the second half of life. We have a great show coming up for you today. I'm going to be speaking with Jim Harshaw about why heartbreak leads to your best relationship. And I love this topic, failure, heartbreak. We often feel devastated, like this is the end. But when you tune in, you can learn so much from the things that feel like failures. So very excited to have Jim on the show. As a dating coach, I specialize in helping women date as the high-value women that they are in every other part of their lives. And I believe that's true for men as well, that when you know your value and you know your own worth, then you attract the best people into your life. And one of the things that I absolutely love to do is to help women recognize their value and express their value through all of their communication. I am a communications expert and wanted to let you know some exciting news. This hasn't actually been published yet, but I just updated my products tab on my website. So if you go to lastfirstdate.com and you click products, I converted all of my high-priced courses into do-it-yourself courses for you so that they're affordable to everybody. And one of those courses is a course on communication with men, how to understand and communicate with men. I have a course on online dating for women over 40. I have a course on overcoming fears in dating and relationships, and that's a brand new course, and that's for men or women. And I have a course on dating success. It's called Ace the Date. All four of them are now lower in price and affordable and available to all of you. I also want to invite you, while you're over at lastfirstdate.com, to sign up for my free guide on the top 3 mistakes that midlife daters make and how you can turn them around to find lasting love. There are actionable tips on how you can turn these mistakes around, these mistakes that we don't even see that we have often because we're too close to them. So if you don't yet have a copy, just go to lastfirstdate.com and sign up right there on my homepage. Also, one last note is if you're not yet a member of my Facebook group, which is called Your Last First Date, please join us. We have almost 450 members now, and the conversation is so amazing on this page. Women come here to, this is just for women over 40, by the way, but women come here to get insights into the dating struggles that they have and also to share successes. And I have to tell you that one of my inner circle members from my group coaching just got engaged. We have some members of this group that just got engaged. And so people are finding love at every age, at every stage in life. And I would love for you to go on your last first date, so please join us at any of those many, many ways to get connected. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Audible. If you are a person like me who loves to read but doesn't always have time, and you're in the car or you're out walking or you're at the gym, audiobooks are the best. Audible has one of the largest selections of audiobooks, so all you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate. And now I'm going to introduce our fabulous guest. His name is Jim Harshaw, and he has learned many life lessons on the wrestling mat, having been a Division I All-American and won 3 ACC Championships for the University of Virginia. He's trained at the Olympic Training Center and competed for Team USA. He has experienced significant triumph and devastating defeat. He relates those powerful lessons of failure, struggle, and setback to empower his audiences to overcome their own challenges. He is a speaker, a coach, and a host of a podcast called Wrestling with Success. Welcome to the show, Jim Harshaw.
Hey, Sandy, it's great to be here.
Thank you. Great to have you. So failure and success, and boy, learning on the wrestling mat. That's a good place to learn, because when you're in any kind of sport, there's a lot of failure before you succeed, and it's not just about winning, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit more about, why you talk about failure.
Yeah, this is, first of all, your audience is probably wondering why in the heck you have a wrestler on the show and how this is going to be relevant to them. But I promise you for the listener, keep listening. It's going to be extremely relevant. This message is relevant for so many people, especially your audience. This is a perfect message, and I'm so glad you had me on. A lot of my life as an athlete was failure. So I you read my bio, and it's there's this tremendous success that I had, but so much of it for me felt like failure. And as I left athletics and been out of sports for almost 2 decades now, and I look back on my time as an athlete, you gain perspective. And about 5 years ago, I was in a situation, Sandy, where I had a failed business. I had a failed business, and my finances, my family finances were a wreck. My relationship with my wife wasn't where it should have been. I wasn't focused on my family and present with my family when I was at home, my wife and kids, and things just weren't where I envisioned them being. I was at one point successful, and I look back and I said, well, why was I successful then? And how can I replicate that in my life now? And that's a lot about what I want to talk about today. It's hitting the pause button and sort of reflecting back on other times where you've been successful and figuring out what was going on then and how you can replicate that now. Because so many of us in every walk of life, whether it's athletics or business or relationships or health and fitness, we see people who are successful and we say, oh man, look at them. It must be so easy for them. But on my podcast and what I've realized going through life is that the most successful people at anything, again, at relationships, at anything else, they've been through failure. They've been through struggle, and we don't see that. We see the movie star, on TV, or we see the successful athlete on winning the championship and getting the big checks, and we see the successful people doing the things that we wish we were doing, and we say, gosh, it must have been so easy for them. Well, it's different for me because my situation is this. But when you start to talk to those people that we put on a pedestal as successful, they've endured the same struggles, the same failures, the same setbacks and obstacles as you and I. It's just that they've gotten up one more time, every time. And how do we do that, right? How do we pushing? How do we keep trying even though we fail? How do we keep getting up one more time every time, even though we've failed? And it's the same. You can ask yourself that question about. You hear stories about moms who lifted the car up off of their child who got run over. How's anybody able to do anything that's really, really hard? And you have, the answer to that really is you have to have a big enough reason why, and you have to live by that reason why. But that's why this topic is very relevant for your audience, and that's a lot about, that's really what I learned first as an athlete, and then by reflecting back on my life.
Well, that's interesting. I agree with you. I think we often don't see the downside of people who are successful and the path that they've taken to get there. And I actually love hearing stories of struggle and triumph. And it is true that the people who succeed they persevere. I mean, people have talked about grit as being a really important part of success, and that was a big TED Talk about grit, and it was debated. Is that really true? Is it not true? I think it is true. I think that I can tell you in my own field, I actually just got off a call with somebody who is going to interview me for to help other coaches succeed in their businesses, because a lot of coaches quit when they don't have success, and they're not really taught how to run a business. And so they have passion, but they don't really know how to take their failures and then apply lessons learned and keep working towards success. So there's so much to talk about here when it comes to failure and success. So I like what you say about the big why. And so if we take this and we put it into the dating arena, because I see this every day in my Facebook group. I am quitting online dating. I have had it. I had a date scheduled last night with a guy. He never showed up. This guy disappeared. This happened. And so people just say, it's not worth it. I don't want to put myself out there anymore. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to somebody who said that?
I would say it goes back to that why. And so I have, when I hit that point where I had this failed business and my relationship was failing and my finances were failing and everything was kind of a mess in my life, just about 5 years ago, I reflected back on a time when I was successful, and I said, how do I take the lessons? Because we always talk about, you hear people talk about, the life lessons that you learn in sports, and it's so valuable. It's like, well, okay, how do I do that? I'm in this crisis period of my life. How do I learn from that? So the first thing that I realized is that when I was successful as an athlete, it was because I was able to get up one more time every time after these failure after failure after failure. And I talked about that. I know you did a TED Talk, and I did a TED Talk as well. And my TED Talk was called Why I Teach My Children to Fail. And in that TED Talk, I talk about this experience. But the reason why I was able to keep getting up was because I had something that was very important to me, and I knew what was very important to me. Okay, so I hit the pause button on my life. And it really, when I was competing, I don't think I could have written down my values, but I knew them then. And now I'm at this crisis point in my life. Fast forward, I was in this crisis point, and I sat down and I said, okay, what's important to me? And I understood what's important to me, and I said, it's my faith, it's my family, it's fit, which I kind of broke this down into the 4 F's for myself to remember it easier, is faith, family, fit, and fun. So faith, family, or self-explanatory. Fit is not only about fitness, but also a job and a lifestyle that fits my interests. And then fun is a value that I have. And so I would say to your listener or your the members of your Facebook community that, whenever you experience that failure, that setback, that obstacle, that adversity, once again, you have to say, okay, I'm going to quit online dating. I'm going to, quit whatever the case might be. What's my why? Why am I'm doing the online dating? If I go back to that why, then I'm able to push through. I'm able to say, okay, this sucks. This hurts. This is, another setback. I've been set back time and time and time again. But if you go back to your why, if that why hasn't changed, then you shouldn't quit. If that thing is if that is still important to you, then you shouldn't quit. I had a guest on my podcast, Wrestling with Success, just a few weeks ago, and we had the discussion of how do you know when to quit, which is such a hard thing to answer, because at some point you should quit certain things, and he said you shouldn't quit something because it's hard. You should quit something because it doesn't align with what you're trying to accomplish or how you see yourself as a person. You should quit then. But if it aligns with who you see yourself as becoming, then you shouldn't quit because it's hard. And I said that sounds like what the situation that probably a lot of your listeners may be in. And it's easier said than done. It's easier for me to sit here in my chair and say this to you in an interview. But when you're in the throes of this, when you're in the depths of this struggle, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard for you, just the same as it was hard for anybody who has ever achieved something important to them, right? So, achieving anything worthwhile isn't easy. And someone told me once, they said, no, there are certain things that are easy that are worthwhile doing. I said, no, they're not easy. I said, they're simple, but they're not easy for certain things, But anything worthwhile doing is not easy. It's going to come with struggle. It's going to come with setback. It's going to come with failure. It's going to come with hurt and broken hearts. And I remember the first time that I had my heart broken. I was actually I was at the Olympic Training Center that summer, and I was talking to one of the Olympic athletes, and he said, "Yeah, everybody's got to go through that." And I was like, and it made it so much more bearable for me. And I said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Because if everybody has to go through it, and I did, and I went through it just like everybody else has to go through it at some point in their lives. And when you normalize that struggle, when you realize there's others that are failing and that are struggling and facing setbacks and adversity, you go, okay, I get it now. I just got off of an interview that I did with a podcast for dads that I reflected back on a time when my next door neighbor, we had just had our first child, and he was a few months old and colic and awake long nights, awake crying throughout the middle of the night for hours, and she said, Jim, when you feel like you're the only parent up in the middle of the night walking up and down the hall trying to get your crying baby to calm down, realize that there are legions of other parents out there dealing with the same thing. And that made sense. And I said, it's like, and it's the same in the dating game. It's the same in relationships. Yeah. That's failure and struggle. It's normal. It doesn't feel good, but it happens to everyone, and there's others out there going through it too.
It's true, and that's a really good point. And that's actually why I started my group, because community is so helpful when you're going through anything.
Yeah.
And it's also
Shared
good
experience.
to celebrate, to celebrate the good. And I always tell people when they private message me and say, I'm engaged or we're announcing, I'm like, tell everybody, they need to know that there's happy endings out there.
Yeah.
That they're, that it's possible for them.
Yeah.
And again, they may look at it just like you said at the beginning and say, oh, well, it was easy for her. She lives here. She's got this privilege. She's got that. Not true. And so much of all of this in life is mindset. It's how you see it. It's what you do with it. But the why is elusive to a lot of people. And I was listening to a podcast last night, and somebody was saying how she's a dating coach also, and she said, I ask people what they want, and they say, oh, I want that big love. I want to have it. I'm yearning for it. And then she'll say, why? And it's like blank. Quiet. They have no idea.
Yeah, and it's a hard question. It's a hard question to ask, and it's a hard question to answer, but it's the question to answer, right?
Yes.
It's a hard one, but that's the value of signing up for one of your programs or being in your groups, is because when you ask yourself this, if you're driving down the road, you can kind of let yourself off the hook and you don't really have to answer it, or your mind drifts off and you don't really answer the question. But if you have somebody else that asks you that question of why, it's like, phew. And then you struggle through that answering process, and you come out with your why, and it's like, oh, okay, now I've verbalized it. It makes a lot more sense. It makes it more concrete.
Yeah, and it's the motivator for business. It's it's the thing that keeps me going, is knowing that I can help people and that I have certain gifts that I can't use in any other part of my life. And I think that definition of what is, when do you quit is such an interesting one too. I love that, because, when people leave a marriage, let's talk about that, leave a relationship, it's if you quit just because it was hard or because you had conflict, that's a bad reason. That's because it was hard. And, if you've tried everything and you realize we're totally out of alignment, this doesn't work for me, I need to get out. And I remember hearing Dr. Phil say years and years ago that when you leave a relationship when you're really angry, you haven't really worked through enough to get to the right place leave the relationship.
Good point.
It should be a point, right?
Yeah. One of my guests, he's the TV show host for a new TV show. It's a really great show called Fit to Fat to Fit. It's on A&E. It's a really cool show. But anyway, Drew Manning just went through a divorce, and it was really hard for him to share this. But he kind of recently has been sharing it more and more. But he and his wife are on great terms, which I was like, wow, how does that happen? I mean, gosh, I'm still married to my wife, and we're not even always on great terms, And that's really interesting that you brought that up about what Dr. Phil said, because that's a good point. You have to really exhaust all options, and if it doesn't align with how you see yourself, then you leave for logical reasons as opposed to just maybe emotional reasons.
Leave for the right reasons, and I think And when I left my husband, I was really pretty much exhausted. This is like, I'm done. I've tried everything. I'm not angry at you. We can't. This doesn't work. Yeah. And actually, we got along better in the last 3 years of our separation than probably our entire marriage. And my kids were very confused. You're going for walks together. You're talking things out. And it was a gift. It was a gift of our divorce that we could talk things out. And, it's still not simple.
Sure.
There's a reason we're divorced. But I really value kindness and connection. And so that's a value of mine. So I make it work. Let's talk about your TED Talk, because that's fascinating to me. I also teach my children to fail. So I would love to hear your perspective, and if you could just kind of sum up your TED Talk and why you chose to talk about this.
Yeah, I chose. It was interesting how the whole TED Talk came about. It was on such short notice that I heard about this opportunity to apply, and it was just this topic that's been on my heart. The title was "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," but the message is meant for everybody, because everybody struggles with failure. It's not a talk about my children or kids, or how to teach youth and adolescents how to fail. It's a talk about how we as people can learn the value of failure and how we put that in perspective. So the why I chose it is just because it was on my heart. It had been on my heart for a long time, and I had an opportunity to put that into a cohesive message and share it with the world, and the response has just been tremendous. And there's so much pain out in the world, Sandy, that I see because of failure and struggle and adversity and setback. And some people like me, I was just endlessly blessed to have amazing people through athletics coaching me through that failure. Because I tell you, Sandy, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, I say, my goal is to become a Division I All-American, and I failed my freshman year. I failed my sophomore. I failed my junior year. At the end, in my junior year, I found myself again in the locker room, my face buried in a towel in tears, wondering, why can't I do this? Maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe I just don't have what it takes, which I promise you, some of your listeners in some way, whether it's in relationships or some other part of their life, they're feeling that way either right now to a high degree or to a low degree. I don't know, somewhere on that sliding scale. But we've all been there, right? We've all felt that hopelessness, like, I guess I just can't do this. I guess it's just not meant to be for me. And I wanted to share that so bad, and I still share it. I get to talk now and speak at to different companies and groups and organizations and schools about this, on this topic of failure now, because everyone feels it, because everyone experiences it, and it's so relevant, and there's so much pain out there. And if you're not blessed enough, like I was, to have other people sort of guide you through this process and go, it's okay, because this is part of the path. This is this is a stepping stone in your path to success. If you don't have that, you just languish in your self-doubt. And you mentioned something earlier, and you said it's a mindset. And you grow up hearing about mindset and attitude and change your attitude. It's like, well, what does that mean? Change your attitude? Is it an exercise that I do, or is it clothing that I put on, or is it a switch that I have to flip? What does that mean? It's I boil it down to this, and I'll give you a quote that I heard a while back. It was this. It was, if your mind is a supercomputer, your self-talk is the program that's running it. So it's the words that we say. It's whether it's the actual words that we say out loud, the words that we say to ourselves, that little voice going on inside of our head. It's the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. You know, if I'm saying online dating is just not for me, or success in a relationship is, at this point in my life is just not for me. Well, then guess what? You're right. If you keep telling yourself that, you're going to convince yourself of that, and you're going to live that way. You're going to live in that. You're going to, the phone calls that you make, the emails that you send, the words that you say, the interactions that you have with people are all going to be based on this story that you're telling yourself. And you know what? You have to. You might have to. You're going to feel like you're trying to trick yourself or lie to yourself initially by saying, that you are worthy, but you are, okay? Because there's other people in the world who have succeeded. There are lesser people in the world who have succeeded at this than you. So you are capable of doing this, and it's just a matter of repeating it to yourself until you start believing it, because you should believe it, because you have every reason to believe it. And if you sat down and I told you, give me 3 reasons, write down 3 reasons why you are capable. Everyone could write down those 3 reasons. I don't care about how many reasons you have that you can't, but you have reasons that you can, and therefore you will and you can if you put your mind to it. And if you say those words, you will start to the action will follow those words.
Yeah, self-talk, oh my God, all those negative little gremlins that live in our heads.
Sure.
It's so much of what we do in coaching is to help people to quiet those thoughts, to calm the thoughts, to really replace them with positive thoughts, because if you're putting one in, you could put the other one in, like you said.
That's right.
It's what you're feeding into it. I think there's that old Indian legend about the wolf and what you feed it. I don't remember the exact one, but it's like, it's whatever you feed it is what it becomes.
Yeah.
So you went back just to finish up your story. So you went back to take the lessons of success that helped you through. So during this hard time when you felt like a failure, you had coaches who helped you. Is that who pulled you through?
Yeah. It was 2 things. It was coincidentally the guy that was my sports psychologist when I was in college, who helped me get over my mental barrier of feeling like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough to become an All-American, to reach my goal. The man who helped me overcome that, he still lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, still does now, which is where I live in Charlottesville, which is where University of Virginia is. And so I tracked him down, and we had stayed in touch sort of briefly and periodically over the years, but we got together and spent some time together, and we did an assessment together, and I learned a little bit more about myself and why I felt that way. And so I got a coach to help me through it, and then I started a mastermind group, and I actually identified some folks in the community who I thought I did relate to well. Actually, I started with one person who I know had similar thoughts and philosophies and hopes and aspirations as me, and I called him. I didn't know him, actually. Had interacted with him through an online forum and for business owners, and I knew he lived about 20 miles away, so I was like, I'm going to shoot him an email. And we got together, had coffee, and said, hey, let's get a 3rd person. And the 3 of us got together, and we said, hey, let's get a 4th person. We grew up to 7 people now, and we get together once a month, and we talk about our weaknesses and our strengths and our wins and our losses, and our, we provide each other feedback and advice and guidance and help and connections. And it's been those are the 2 things that really helped me get through that process. But I also, so I recognized this process of, number 1, understanding my values. What was important to me. When I was an athlete, it worked, and then I replicated that in my life. And then the second thing is I created goals that aligned with those values. I had that in place in my life as an athlete, and then I replicated those and created goals that aligned with my new values as a 35-year-old. and father of 3 at the time, now 4, and husband. I created those new goals, and then the third step was creating an environment in which I could achieve those goals, just like I had when I was an athlete. I was in the right environment. I created that environment for myself to be successful, and then fourth, I implemented a plan for following through. And those are the 4 pieces that I had in my life as an athlete, and those are the 4 pieces I replicated in my life 5 years ago, and my life has been on a completely different trajectory ever since. And it's my relationship's better than it's ever been with my wife and my children, and health, fitness, finances, everything is back in order and on the right trajectory, and it's great. It's been just a big revelation that I've enjoyed sharing with people.
That's great. Well, it all makes perfect sense to take those steps, and they're really good steps. You really have to go back to what are your core values, because so many people don't know. And honestly, when I started taking coaching classes, that was the first time that I really sat down and defined my core values. And if you're living a life out of alignment, which I did for most of my marriage, you can't thrive. You just can't. And when you define your values and you can align with them and you get support, mastermind group, I have a mastermind group too. I have accountability partners. I have Facebook groups that support me. I mean, there's so many ways for people to get support today. Hire a coach, and then implement plans, set goals, implement them. I mean, if you have structure in your life, it just changes your life. I mean, to sit down every day and know that you have a plan and you're working towards something, and it's really amazing what happens when you come from that place.
That's right. And then failure almost becomes not irrelevant, but it just becomes, instead of mountains you have to cross, they become bumps you have to get over.
Yeah, and it gets easier each time. And it's because your perspective shifts, and now they're stepping stones, and it's you can get up. Like I had a coach friend who used to say, "You've slain bigger dragons." Like you got this. You can take from your past experience and say, "Well, I overcame this, so I have the tools to do this." And without failure, and this goes back to our children and how we raise our kids, people can't learn. And I unfortunately, my kids were brought up by 2 parents who had very different ideas about teaching their children to fail, and I was looked at as the bad guy for a long time, and I really had to help them shift their perspective, because they started to see, it's actually good for us to learn on our own. Thank you for teaching me responsibility. Thank you for teaching me that I had to earn my own money. They value things more when they learn their lessons, and it's really an epidemic in today's society where parents try to do too much for their children. And there's a term, actually. There was a woman who wrote a book called The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. Did you ever read that book?
No, I haven't.
It's a really good book. It's really written from a values perspective from a psychologist who saw so many people come into her practice who were giving their kids the wrong messages and really skewed values. And the point is, skin your knee, fall down, you'll get up again. That's how you learn. And she said that when kids go to college, and I heard her speak like probably 10 years ago, she said there was a term for these kids who would come into college with no backbone, without any skills, because their parents did everything for them, and they would call them teacups because they were so fragile. You don't want to raise teacups. And, you want to have kids who can fall down, get the crack in the teacup, get back up again, brush your knees off. And so that's, bringing it back to relationships, that whole idea of heartbreak. First of all, it means that you've taken a risk. You've loved. You haven't stayed in your little cocoon all safe and shut everything down and said, well, I'd rather be alone. It means that you've taken a risk and that you're open to love, and that's also a first important step.
Yep.
All right. Well, there's so much more to say about this. It's a fascinating topic, and I really appreciate what you've shared with us today, Jim.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah, I could talk for days about this stuff, but yeah, thanks for having me on. This was great.
It's my pleasure. So thank you. And please tell our audience how they can find out more about you.
Yeah, my audience is mostly former athletes, but you can certainly, my TED Talk is highly relevant for everybody, so you can go to my website, jimharshawjr.com, jimharshawjr.com, and there's a link in the menu, right on the menu on the homepage for the TED Talk. Also, if you're interested in learning about how to create a mastermind group, you can just enter your email address in the box on the home page there, and you'll get access to a 10-page ebook I created on how to create your own mastermind group. And you also actually get access to this 4-step blueprint for success that I call it, that I teach through my programs. You can get access to that through a free PDF download on my website as well. So yeah, jimharshawjr.com, and then on Twitter, just at Jim Harshaw, and on Instagram, Jim Harshaw Jr., Facebook, Jim Harshaw Jr.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it, and best of luck to you. I hope you fail often and get up each time.
That's right. Get up one more time every time. Thanks,
That's
Sandy.
Right.
And you too as well.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for joining us here today, and I hope you go on your last first date very soon. Have a great day.